The snow was falling so thick it felt like riding through television static. Each flake a white bullet in the high beams, swirling and diving in the violent wind that screamed down from the mountain pass. The kind of cold that didn't just bite, it devoured. It reached through leather and denim and skin and settled deep in the bone, reminding a man that nature didn't give a damn about his plans or his schedule or whether he made it home for Christmas. Garrett Dalton wasn't thinking about Christmas. At 45 years old, with a beard gone gray at the edges and hands scarred from 1,000 bar fights and engine rebuilds, Garrett had stopped believing in Christmas somewhere around 1985. What he believed in now was keeping the heavy Harley panhead upright on the black ice that lurked beneath the fresh powder covering Highway 10. What he believed in was making it back to the Spokane clubhouse before hypothermia turned his fingers into useless clubs. The Snoqualmie Pass at 11:30 on Christmas Eve was a place designed to kill the unprepared. Garrett was many things, most of them illegal, but unprepared wasn't one of them. The custom panhead beneath him was built for punishment, wide tires with aggressive tread, engine tuned to roar even in sub-zero temperatures. And Garrett himself, 6'4" and 240 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, was dressed in layers that would have made an Arctic explorer nod with approval. Heavy sheepskin-lined leather jacket, reinforced riding gloves, a skull cap under his half helmet to keep the wind from peeling the skin off his skull. Still, the cold found ways in. It always did. The mandatory run to Seattle had been club business, the kind of business that required Garrett's particular skill set, which primarily involved looking intimidating and occasionally making people understand that certain debts needed to be paid. It had gone smoothly, too smoothly maybe, which was why Garrett's instincts were humming even before he saw the color. A flash of pale pink against the endless, aggressive white of the snowbank. 99 people out of 100 would have kept riding, would have assumed it was a piece of blown debris, a tarp torn loose from some trucker's load, a scrap of fabric with no story worth stopping for. But Garrett's eyes, dark and perpetually narrowed against a world that had never cut him any slack, were trained to notice the things that didn't belong. It was a survival skill learned in juvenile detention, refined in county lockup, and perfected during 23 years wearing the death's head patch of the Hells Angels. Something about that pink didn't sit right. He downshifted, feeling the engine's protest vibrate through his thighs as the rear tire broke traction for a heart-stopping second before the aggressive tread bit into the ice and held. The panhead slowed, fishtailing slightly, sending up a spray of powder that glittered in the taillights like diamond dust. Garrett brought the bike to a controlled stop on the shoulder, kicked the stand down with a practiced motion, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was profound. No traffic, no civilization, just the howl of the wind and the whisper of a million snowflakes landing on a million others. Garrett swung his leg over the bike and immediately sank knee-deep into the drift. His engineer boots, heavy and reinforced, crunched through the crust of ice on top and found no solid ground beneath. He waded forward, each step requiring real effort, his breath coming out in white clouds that the wind tore apart before they could fully form. The pink shape began to resolve as he got closer. It wasn't a tarp. It was fabric, yes, but thin cotton, a pajama top, the kind with little cartoon characters on it. And beneath that pajama top, curled into a tight shivering ball, was a child. Garrett stopped breathing. The little girl couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. She was small, too small. Her blonde hair, matted with ice and frozen blood, was plastered against a face so pale it was almost blue. Her bare feet, delicate and impossibly vulnerable, were purple from the cold. No shoes, no socks, just those thin pink pajamas and a pair of matching pants, both soaked through and starting to freeze solid against her skin. He dropped to his knees in the snow, the impact sending a jolt through his bad knee, the one that had been shattered by a Louisville slogger in a fight outside Reno in 1994. He pulled off his heavy leather gauntlets with his teeth and reached out. His hands, massive and scarred, looked like they could crush bones without effort. But the touch when it came was surprisingly gentle. Calloused fingers against an ice-cold cheek. like touching a corpse. Garrett's heart, which had been hardened by decades of violence and loss, and the daily grind of living outside the law, lurched in his chest. He rolled her slightly onto her back to check for breathing, and the headlight from his bike, cutting through the blizzard at just the right angle, illuminated the full horror of what had been done to her. Her face was severely swollen. A dark, angry ring of purple and black surrounded her left eye, the kind of bruising that came from a closed fist driven by adult strength and rage. Her lower lip was split, crusted with dried blood that had frozen into a dark line down her chin, and on her thin arms, visible even through the wet fabric of her pajamas, were bruises. Defensive bruises. The unmistakable shapes of adult fingers stamped violently into flesh that should have been protected, cherished, kept safe. This child hadn't wandered out here. She hadn't gotten lost playing in the snow. Someone had beaten her, driven her out to the middle of nowhere in a blizzard, and thrown her into a ditch to die. On the holiest night of the year, someone had tried to murder a little girl. A faint sound pulled Garrett out of the dark place his mind was spiraling toward. A rattling exhale, barely audible over the wind. But there, she was breathing. Alive. Barely. There was no time to call 911. Out here in the absolute middle of nowhere, an ambulance would take 45 minutes minimum. Probably longer in this weather. And this little girl didn't have 45 minutes. Her core temperature had to be dangerously low. Organs shutting down, heart rate dropping, brain damage accumulating with every passing second. Plus, and this was the calculation Garrett made in less than a heartbeat, he had active warrants. An old aggravated assault charge out of Oregon that he'd been dodging for 3 years. If state troopers showed up, they'd run his ID and he'd be in cuffs before he could finish explaining why he had an unconscious child. Without a second thought, Garrett stripped off his heavy reinforced leather jacket. The club cut the sacred vest with its patches and its death's head, and its history written in road dust, in blood, and sweat was still attached. He wrapped the massive garment around the tiny girl, the sheepskin lining enveloping her entirely. She weighed nothing. When he scooped her up into his arms, it was like holding a bundle of dry twigs. "Hold on, little bird," Garrett whispered, his voice a gravelly rumble that even he barely recognized. "I got you. You're not dying out here, not tonight." He carried her to the Harley, cradling her against his chest with one arm, while he used the other to swing his leg back over the bike. He settled her between his chest and the gas tank, tucking her into the narrow space, then zipped his thick flannel shirt over her as best he could. His body heat, the engine heat, when it fired up, and the makeshift cocoon of leather and flannel would have to be enough. Garrett hit the ignition. The panhead roared to life, the sound obscene in the quiet snowfall. A mechanical scream of defiance against the cold and the night and the evil that had done this. He didn't bother with the speed limit, didn't bother with caution. He opened the throttle and pushed the bike to the absolute edge of disaster, leaning into turns that should have sent them both sliding into the guardrail, gunning the engine on straightaways until the speedometer needle buried itself past anything rational. The little girl's face was pressed against his chest. He could feel her shallow breathing through the flannel, could feel how cold she still was despite the layers. She didn't wake, didn't cry, just kept breathing those faint, rattling breaths that Garrett counted like a rosary. The neon sign of Rusty's Auto Salvage flickered weakly through the storm on the outskirts of Spokane. Behind the scrapyard, hidden from the road by stacks of crushed vehicles and shipping containers, sat a heavily fortified cinder block garage. 3 bays, reinforced steel doors, no windows. It was where Dr. Silas Merrick spent his nights. Doc Merrick had lost his medical license a decade ago. Something about writing off-the-books prescriptions for pain medication that found its way to people who couldn't afford legitimate doctors. The angels had picked him up, given him purpose, and now he was the best trauma surgeon that on the wrong side of the law. Garrett pulled the panhead right up to the steel door and kicked it hard enough to leave a dent. Doc opened the damn door. Heavy locks unfastened with metallic clatter. The door swung open to reveal Doc Merrick, a thin, nervous man in his 60s holding a pump-action shotgun. His wire-rimmed glasses were slightly crooked and on his face. The shotgun lowered the instant he saw what Garrett was carrying. Mother of God, Doc breathed. Clear the bench. Garrett ordered, pushing past him into the blessed heat. Now, Doc, move. Doc scrambled, sweeping motorcycle parts off the long metal workbench. Garrett laid the bundle down as gently as he could and pulled back the heavy leather jacket. The overhead fluorescent lights revealed what the headlight had only hinted at. Doc took a step back, his hand going to his mouth. Good God, Garrett, what have you done? I didn't do this, you idiot, Garrett snarled. I found her off Highway 10, dumped in a snowbank like garbage. She's freezing to death, and she's been beaten half to hell. So you're going to fix her, Doc. You're going to save her life. Doc's professional instincts finally overrode his shock. He grabbed a heavy wool blanket, pulled a portable space heater from the corner, retrieved his medical kit. For the next hour, the garage functioned as an emergency room. Doc elevated her body temperature using the space heater and warm blankets, started an IV of warm saline, cleaned her wounds with antiseptic. Garrett stood in the corner, chain-smoking Marlboros, pacing like a caged tiger. 4 steps one way, turn, 4 steps back. He looked at his hands. Her blood was on them. The Hells Angels were outlaws. But there was an ironclad, unwritten rule in the biker code. You do not touch women, and you never ever harm a child. To do so was a death sentence, not from the law, from the Brotherhood. Whoever had done this to the little girl had signed their own death warrant. They just didn't know it yet. She's stabilizing, Doc finally said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Body temp is coming up, 94 degrees, still dangerously low, but climbing. He paused, looking down at the small, battered face. The bruises, Garrett. This wasn't a one-time thing. These are in different stages of healing. Someone has been hurting this child for a long time, systematically, repeatedly. Garrett crushed his cigarette beneath his boot heel. The rage that had been building since he found her in the snow was no longer just heat. It was cold now, calculated, deadly. Doc gently turned the girl's head to clean a gash near her ear, and something caught the overhead fluorescent light, a glint of gold. Wait, look at this. Garrett stepped forward. Tangled in the girl's hair was a heavy, incredibly ornate gold locket on a thick chain, the kind of jewelry that costs serious money. Doc worked the clasp free and held the locket up to the light. He popped the latch. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph. A woman with striking green eyes holding a baby. Etched into the opposite side of the gold were the letters E.M. Beloved. This is solid 24-karat gold, Doc whispered. Custom-made, hand-engraved. This child doesn't come from a trailer park, Garrett. This is serious money, serious power. And someone with both tried very hard to make sure this little girl never made it to sunrise. Before Garrett could respond, a small, terrified whimper broke the silence. The little girl's eyes fluttered open. They were a piercing, vivid green, exactly like the woman in the locket. She looked up at the unfamiliar ceiling, then saw Garrett. He was a terrifying sight, a giant of a man covered in tattoos with a thick beard and eyes narrowed in anger. The leather cut draped over a nearby chair displayed the winged death's head of the Hells Angels. She shrank back, letting out a sharp gasp. Garrett immediately dropped to one knee, bringing his eye level down to hers, took off his skull cap, dropped his cigarette and crushed it, held his hands out, palms up. Hey, he said, his voice dropping to the softest rumble he could manage. Hey, it's okay. Nobody's gonna hurt you here. I promise you that. What's your name, little bird? The little girl trembled, pulling the wool blanket up to her chin. She looked at his leather jacket, the one that had saved her life. Then she looked back at his eyes. Children have an innate radar for danger, but they also have a radar for true protectors. Whatever she saw in Garrett's eyes made her stop crying. Nora, she whispered, her voice raspy and broken. My name is Nora. Okay, Nora, Garrett said. I'm Garrett. Who did this to you? Who left you in the snow? Nora's lower lip quivered. She clutched the locket around her neck tightly, her green eyes filled with tears. The warden, she whispered. He said I was bad. He said I didn't deserve Christmas because I'm not his real daughter. He said Christmas is only for real daughters, not stolen ones. The words hung in the air like smoke. Stolen. She had said stolen. Garrett stood up slowly. But inside, the protective instinct that had fueled his desperate ride through the blizzard was transforming into something else entirely. Something colder, more calculated, more dangerous. Doc, Garrett said quietly, keep the door locked. I need to make a phone call. He stepped out into the cold and pulled out his phone. The first call was to Cole Blackwood, Reaper, the chapter president. Iron, Cole's voice came through rough with sleep. It's 2 a.m. on Christmas. This better be important. I found a little girl on Highway 10, 6 years old, beaten half to death and dumped in a snowbank to freeze. Someone tried to kill her Reaper. Someone with money and power. A pause, then Cole's voice came back, all traces of sleep gone. Is she alive? Barely. Doc's got her stable, but whoever did this needs to answer for it. And I'm not talking about the cops. I'm talking about us. The club. Garrett, Cole said carefully, if we go after someone with money and power, they're going to come back at us with everything they've got. This could burn the whole chapter. Then let it burn, Garrett said. This little girl was thrown away like garbage, left to die in the cold. And I'm telling you right now, Reaper with or without the club's backing, I'm going after whoever did this. The silence stretched out. Then give me 30 minutes. I'll have everyone there. Garrett made 2 more calls. One to Declan Rourke, a fixer who owed the club his life. I need you to run something for me. Gold locket, hand engraved, initials EM with the word beloved. I need to know who it belonged to, family name, address, everything. That's a tall order at 2 a.m. on Christmas, Declan wheezed. I'll make it worth your while. Give me an hour. The second call was to Dutch, one of the club's enforcers. I need you to pull traffic camera footage from Highway 10 mile marker 42 between 9 and midnight tonight. I'm looking for a luxury SUV, Range Rover, Mercedes G-Wagon. Got it, Dutch rumbled. Garrett ended the call and stood in the snow smoking another Marlboro, watching the flakes fall. Somewhere out there in one of those expensive houses in the gated communities, someone was sleeping soundly, believing they'd gotten away with murder. They were wrong. By 3 a.m, Rusty's auto salvage was no longer quiet. The roar of a dozen heavy V-twin engines shook the snow off the roof as patched members of the Spokane Hells Angels arrived. They filed into the garage, a terrifying assembly of leather and denim and muscle and ink. At the center of the room stood Cole Blackwood. At 48, Cole was a man who commanded absolute loyalty through intelligence, ruthlessness, and fairness. He had a long, jagged scar running down the left side of his face, a souvenir from the Gulf War. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they missed nothing. Garrett stood by the workbench. Behind him in Doc's small back office, Nora slept heavily under the effects of painkillers. Listen up, Cole said. The room fell silent. We have a situation. Garrett's going to brief you. Garrett stepped forward. At 11:30 tonight, I found a 6-year-old girl in a snowbank on Highway 10 near mile marker 42. She'd been beaten, severely. Multiple injuries in various stages of healing. Someone has been abusing this child for months. Tonight, they drove her out to the middle of nowhere in a blizzard and threw her into a ditch to freeze to death. A low, dangerous murmur rippled through the assembled men. Her name is Nora, Garrett continued. She's sleeping in the back room right now. Doc says she'll live, but it was close. Another hour and she'd be dead. Whoever did this thought they were dumping a body. He pulled the gold locket from his pocket. She was wearing this. high-quality gold, custom-made, initials EM. I've got Declan running it down, but my gut tells me this kid comes from money, real money. Cole took the locket and examined it. The cops operate by the book. They need warrants. They need jurisdiction. We don't. Highway 10 is our road. This happened on our stretch, and nobody dumps a kid on our territory and lives to see New Year's. He looked at Garrett. What did you see at the scene? Snow was heavy, Garrett replied. But before I pulled her out, I saw tire tracks, wide tread, deep grooves, a heavy luxury SUV. He pulled out a crumpled, damp piece of paper, and I found this frozen in the slush. Looked like it fell out of someone's pocket. Cole took it. A receipt, the ink heavily smeared, but a few lines legible. Silverleaf Fine Wines and Spirits. Date December 24th. Time 21:15. Customer Carver T. Dutch straightened up. Silverleaf, that's South Hill. Gated communities, country clubs. Cole's eyes narrowed. Carver. You know a Thaddeus Carver. Yeah, Dutch said. Thaddeus Carver, CEO of Carver Logistics, real estate, shipping, local politics. He plays golf with the chief of police, and he drives a black Mercedes G-Wagon, 2023 model. The pieces were falling into place. A wealthy, untouchable pillar of the community, a stolen child, a brutal attempt to dispose of evidence. He thinks his money makes him invisible, Garrett said. Cole put a hand on Garrett's chest, not restraining, just grounding. Hold on, Iron. We don't just kick down the door of a billionaire on Christmas morning. If we do this, we do it the Angels way. We take him apart piece by piece. He turned to the brothers. Dutch, you take 3 guys. Go to Carver's estate in South Hill. Get eyes on the property. Check the garage for that G-Wagon. See if the tires match. Don't engage. Just watch. Dutch nodded and pointed at 3 men. They headed for the door. Garrett, Cole said, you and I wait for Declan's call. We need to know who EM is. We need to know what Carver is hiding. Before anyone could say anything else, a small gasp came from the doorway. Nora was standing there wrapped in an oversized wool blanket, her bare feet pale against the concrete. She looked at the room full of giant, intimidating men, and instead of running away, she walked straight toward Garrett. The brothers parted for her. She walked right through them and reached out with one small, bruised hand, grabbing 2 of Garrett's thick, tattooed fingers. Are you going to get the warden? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her green eyes. Garrett knelt down, bringing himself eye level with her. The entire room watched in absolute silence. Yeah, Nora, Garrett said. We're going to get him, and he is never, ever going to hurt you again. I swear it. Nora nodded slowly. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said something that made every man in that room understand exactly why they were there. Good, she said, because he's not my daddy. My real daddy was someone else. And the warden locked my mommy in a hospital. She's been there for a long time. He said she was crazy, but I don't think she is. I think he just wanted her to go away. The revelation hit the room like a physical force. This wasn't just child abuse. This was orchestration. Conspiracy. A man with power systematically destroying a family. Cole's phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at Garrett. It's Declan. He's got the information. Cole put the phone on speaker. Declan's wheezing voice filled the garage. The locket belonged to Evelyn Morrison, Declan said. The Morrisons were old money. Timber, shipping, real estate. Evelyn was the sole heir to a trust fund worth upwards of $200 million. 5 years ago, she married a guy named Thaddeus Carver. The name hung in the air. Confirmation. 2 years ago, Declan continued, Carver had a private judge declare Evelyn completely mentally incompetent, claimed she was a danger to herself and her child. He was granted full power of attorney and control over the Morrison Trust. Then he locked her away in the Pine Haven Institute, private psychiatric facility up in the mountains near Coeur d'Alene. Garrett stood up slowly, Nora still holding on to his fingers. The woman who was locked away. The mother who hadn't abandoned her daughter. The trust has a stipulation, Cole said. If Evelyn dies, the money goes to her direct bloodline, to Nora. Exactly, Declan's voice crackled. But as long as Nora is alive, Carver can't fully liquidate the assets. He can manage them, skim off the top, but he can't touch the principal. But if Evelyn is locked away forever, Garrett said, and if Nora tragically wanders off into a blizzard and freezes to death, then Carver inherits it all. $200 million, Cole finished. He beat a 6-year-old girl and threw her into a ditch for money. The collective rage of the chapter was a physical force. Men gripped chains. Others checked weapons. Cole stepped into the center of the room. Here's the play. We don't just take his life. We take his power. We take his freedom. We make him face what he's done. He began assigning roles. Dutch, when you're at the estate, I want photographs of everything. We need evidence that'll hold up when we hand him to the feds. Jax, Bear. He pointed at 2 massive enforcers. Take 4 men and ride to Idaho. Hit the Pine Haven Institute. Find Evelyn Morrison. Get her out of there. Bring her to the safe house. Jax nodded. What if they resist? Then you educate them, Cole said flatly. But try not to kill anyone. We need this to be a rescue, not a massacre. He turned to Garrett. You and I coordinate from here. We wait for Dutch's recon. We wait for confirmation from Pine Haven. And then we pay Mr. Carver a visit. Garrett looked down at Nora. We're going to get your mom, and we're going to make sure the warden never hurts anyone ever again. Nora nodded. Then she leaned forward and rested her head against his leg. The room full of outlaws watched in silence. These were hard men, dangerous men. But in that moment, every single one of them understood exactly what they were fighting for. Mount up, Cole ordered. Let's go hunting. The engines roared to life, 12 Harleys screaming defiance into the Christmas morning darkness. Garrett watched them go, these brothers riding into danger because a little girl needed them. He looked down at Nora still pressed against his leg. You're safe now, little bird. I promise. And somewhere across town in a mansion behind gates and walls, Thaddeus Carver slept soundly, believing himself untouchable, completely unaware that the snow falling on his perfect lawn was about to run red with the consequences of his actions. The Harleys roared into the darkness like mechanical wolves. The convoy split at Highway 95, half the bikes peeling north toward Idaho, the other half heading south toward South Hill. Garrett led the northern group. Behind him, Jax and Bear rode in tight formation, 3 more brothers following. The ride to Pine Haven Institute took 90 minutes. 90 minutes of fighting wind and ice and cold that made a man's bones ache. His mind kept circling back to Nora's words. The warden locked my mommy in a hospital. The absolute conviction that her mother wasn't insane. Just in prison. Just silenced. The Pine Haven Institute revealed itself gradually. It sat on a ridge overlooking a frozen lake, a sprawling complex trying desperately to look warm and welcoming despite the razor wire and security cameras. The architecture was all glass and natural wood, but Garrett recognized a prison when he saw one. The main entrance featured imposing iron gates with a guard shack. A single security guard sat inside drinking coffee watching television. Jax pulled up alongside Garrett. He was massive, 6'6" and close to 300 pounds. You want to try the polite approach? Garrett thought about Nora's bruised face. Thought about a woman locked away for 2 years. No, I don't think I do. Bear didn't wait. He downshifted, opened the throttle, and aimed his bike at the pedestrian gate. The heavy iron gave way with a metallic scream, the locks shattering under 1,200 pounds of motorcycle and rider. The other bikes flooded through. 6 Harley-Davidson engines at full throttle echoed off the buildings, amplifying until it sounded like the end of the world. The security guard stumbled out fumbling with his radio. He was young, maybe 25. He took one look at 6 fully patched Hell's Angels, and his hand moved away from the taser very quickly. This is private property, he shouted. Jax dismounted and walked directly toward the guard. Didn't run, just walked with the inevitability of a glacier. The guard backed against the wall. Jack stopped 6 inches from his face. Looked down. We're here for visiting hours. What room is Evelyn Morrison in? I can't. Patient confidentiality. Jax didn't move, didn't threaten, just stood there radiating physical presence. Third floor, the guard whispered. Room 304, the secure ward. Please don't hurt me. We're not here to hurt you, Garrett said. We're here to right a wrong. You stay in that shack, don't touch that radio, and forget we were ever here. The guard nodded frantically and dove back into the shack. The Angels moved like a unit. They bypassed the main entrance and headed for a side door that Bear forced with one kick. Inside, the Institute maintained its facade. Soft lighting, artwork, plush carpet. But Garrett could smell the institutional reality. Disinfectant, medication, desperation. They climbed 3 flights. The secure ward had heavier doors, electronic locks, security cameras every 20 feet. Bear examined the keypad. Encrypted. Or we could try the direct approach, Jack said. He picked up a fire extinguisher and swung it like a bat into the keypad. Once, twice, 3 times. Sparks flew. On the 4th swing, the lock disengaged with a click. The door swung open. Room 304 was at the end of the hall. Garrett approached alone. He looked through the small window. Inside, sitting on a narrow bed, was a woman. Thin, too thin. Her hair dark brown shot through with gray. She wore a shapeless hospital gown. But her eyes, even through the glass, Garrett could see them. Green, vivid green, the same shade as the locket, the same shade as Nora's eyes. Garrett tried the handle. Locked. Bear applied the fire extinguisher. The lock gave way. Garrett stepped inside. The woman's head turned slowly. The medication made everything sluggish. She looked at Garrett with those green eyes and showed no reaction. Just flat medicated acceptance. Evelyn, Garrett asked softly. She blinked. Are you the warden's men? Are you here to finish it? The question hit Garrett hard. She thought he was here to kill her. Jack stepped into the room behind Garrett. The woman looked at him and still showed no fear. No, ma'am, Jack said, his voice dropping to a whisper. We ain't with Carver. We're with Nora, and she wants her mama. At her daughter's name, something changed in Evelyn's face. The fog didn't lift entirely, but something sparked in those green eyes. Awareness. Hope. Nora, she whispered. My Nora, is she? Her voice broke. Tears started. He said he'd hurt her if I didn't cooperate. I did everything he asked. I thought if I just did what he wanted, he'd leave her alone. Garrett knelt. Nora's alive. She's safe. We were taking you to her, but we need to move fast. Can you walk? Evelyn tried to stand and swayed. Jax caught her. I've got you, ma'am. Just lean on me. We're going home. They wrapped her in Jax's leather jacket and began the journey back. Evelyn moved slowly, but she moved. And with each step, Garrett could see more of the real woman emerging. How long have I been here? She asked. 2 years, Garrett said. 2 years, she repeated. And Nora, what has he done to Nora? He hurt her, Garrett had said, not sugarcoating it. But she survived. She's strong, like her mother. They emerged into the courtyard. The Angels mounted up Evelyn, riding behind Jax. As they roared back through the broken gate, Garrett looked back once at Pine Haven. Someone would pay for every day Evelyn had spent locked in that room, and that someone's name was Thaddeus Carver. Meanwhile, 30 miles south, Cole Blackwood led his team through a different infiltration. The Carver estate was everything expected. 10,000 square feet behind 10-foot gates. Security cameras, motion sensors, the fortress money could buy. Cole and his team approached on foot. They moved like ghosts through the darkness. Dutch, lying on a snow-covered ridge, peered through thermal binoculars. Main gate locked. Security detail looks thin. Detached garage on the east side, doors open. I can see a vehicle. What kind? Cole asked. Big, black, boxy. Could be the G-Wagon. Bones, Cole said, you're up. Bones' former military intelligence moved with practiced efficiency. He scaled the wall, bypassed cameras, disappeared into shadows. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. Cole waited. Bones's voice crackled. Tread matches, and there's more. Passenger door still open. Pink child sneaker on the floorboard. Wool blanket in back. Blanket's got fresh blood. He didn't even clean up yet. Cole's jaw clenched. The arrogance. The certainty that money made him immune. Photos, Cole ordered. Everything. Already on it, Bones replied. Also accessing garage security. Security footage shows G-Wagon leaving 9:47 p.m. last night, returning 11:52 p.m. Timeline matches. Downloading everything. Good. Now get out before someone wakes. Bones materialized from shadows holding up a thumb drive. Everything we need, plus financial records, offshore accounts. He's been cooking the books for years. Outstanding, Cole said. Now we wait for him to come home. Dutch lowered binoculars. He's not here. House is dark, no vehicles, no thermal signatures except housekeeper and staff quarters. Cole considered. Carver had just attempted murder. Driven home, parked with evidence inside, then left again. Where would a man like that go? He thinks he won, Cole said. He thinks he got away with it. Where does a rich sociopath go on Christmas Eve after dumping a body? Somewhere expensive, Dutch suggested. Somewhere with witnesses, Bones added. An alibi. Cole pulled out his phone. Declan, credit card records for Carver, tonight's charges, bars, clubs, restaurants downtown. Typing sounds. Got 3, Silverleaf Wines, Morton's Steakhouse at 10:30 p.m., and Pinnacle Club at 11:45 p.m. Private Gentlemen's Club on 5th Avenue. Members only, $25,000 annual fee. That's where he is, Cole said. He had dinner, dumped Nora, then went to his club to establish alibi and celebrate. He looked at his team. We're going downtown. We wait for Carver to leave. Then we have a conversation. The Pinnacle Club occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower, the kind of place where politicians and CEOs made deals that would never appear in public records. Security was tight, but security was designed to keep people out, not stop them from leaving. They waited in an alley across the street. 4 men in leather, invisible in shadows. At 5:27 a.m. a black Mercedes G-Wagon pulled up. Cole recognized it from Bones's photos. Same vehicle, same plates, same tire treads. Thaddeus Carver emerged, and even from across the street, Cole could see the smug satisfaction. Handsome man in his early 50s, silver hair perfectly styled, cashmere coat. He walked with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He climbed into the G-Wagon and pulled away. Cole and his team mounted bikes' engines roaring in synchronization. They followed at a distance. Streets were empty, city sleeping. Carver turned onto a side street, shortcut through an industrial area. Perfect. No witnesses, no cameras. Cole accelerated. They came up fast, Dutch pulling alongside driver's side. Cole passenger side boxing him in. Bones moved in front, forcing Carver to brake. The G-Wagon screeched to a halt. Cole watched Carver's face. Confusion to fear to outrage. Watched him reach for his phone. Dutch was faster. He dismounted, walked to the driver's door, shattered the window with a tire iron. Safety glass exploded inward. Dutch reached through, unlocked the door, hauled Carver out by his coat. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Carver shouted. "Do you know who I am? I play golf with the chief of police." "Yeah, we've heard," Cole said, walking over slowly. "We've heard all about your connections. Very impressive." He grabbed Carver by the collar, pulled him close. "Here's the thing, we don't give a damn about your money. We don't give a damn about your connections. And we especially don't give a damn about your golf game." "What do you want?" Carver demanded. "We want you to come with us," Cole said. "We want to have a conversation about a little girl named Nora and about what you did to her on Highway 10. Carver's face went pale, bloodless. His mouth opened and closed. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally managed. Sure you don't, Cole said. Yeesh. That's why you went white when I mentioned her. That's why there's a pink sneaker in your back seat and blood on a blanket. Come on, Carver. You know exactly what we're talking about. They zip-tied his hands, ignoring protests and threats, loaded him into a van driven by another brother. The G-Wagon they left, window shattered, door hanging open. Evidence in plain sight. The drive back took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Carver alternating between threatening lawsuits and offering bribes and pleading. Cole ignored it all, just drove in silence. On the highway from Idaho, Garrett rode beside Evelyn, who clung to Jax's back with gradually strengthening hands. The medication was wearing off. The fresh air and adrenaline and hope were burning through the pharmaceutical fog. Tell me about Nora, Evelyn said over the wind. Garrett told her about finding her in the snow, about the hypothermia and bruises, about Doc stabilizing her, about how she'd woken up and asked if they were going to get the warden, about her strength and courage. She never stopped believing in you, Garrett said. Even when Carver told her you were insane, she knew. Evelyn was crying, tears streaming and freezing, but smiling too. I tried so hard to protect her. I signed everything, did everything he asked. I thought if I just complied, he'd leave her alone. He didn't, Garrett said, brutal but necessary. He tried to kill her last night, drove her to Highway 10 in a blizzard and threw her in a snowbank to freeze. Evelyn made a sound that was part sob, part scream, but she survived, Garrett continued. She's alive because she's strong, like her mother. They rode in silence, the sun beginning to rise, turning the snow-covered landscape almost beautiful. What happens now? Evelyn finally asked. To Carver. Garrett thought about that. The easy answer, put a bullet in his skull. Poetic justice. But that wasn't justice, that was revenge. And revenge wouldn't fix anything. That's up to you, Garrett said. We've got evidence, testimony. We can hand him to the FBI. Or, he didn't finish. Evelyn was smart enough to understand what he was offering. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke, voice clear and strong. I want him to face what he's done, she said. I want him to stand in a courtroom and have his crimes read out loud. I want the world to know what kind of monster hides behind that suit. I want him to rot in prison knowing Nora and I are free. Garrett felt something loosen in his chest. This was right. This was justice. Then that's what we'll do, Garrett said. They pulled into Rusty's as the sun cleared the horizon, painting the snow pink and gold. The other team was already there. Cole's bikes parked the van, sitting with engine ticking. Garrett dismounted and helped Evelyn off. She swayed slightly, but her eyes were clear. She looked at the garage, at the dangerous men standing a guard, and felt safe. Nora's inside, Garrett said. Doc's watching her. She's been asking about you. Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. 2 years. 2 years of being told her daughter thought she was crazy, and now just beyond that door, her little girl was waiting. Is she? Evelyn's voice broke. Is she angry with me for leaving? She never stopped believing in you, Garrett said. Cole approached from the van. We've got Carver secured, but first, he gestured toward the garage. First, you need to see your daughter. Garrett pushed open the steel door. Warmth hit them. And there, wrapped in blankets and sitting on Doc's workbench, was Nora. The little girl looked up, saw her mother, and for a moment the entire world held its breath. Nora's eyes went wide. Mommy. The word hung in the air. Then Evelyn was moving, legs weak but will iron strong, crossing the garage in stumbling steps. She dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms. The sound that came from both wasn't quite crying and wasn't quite laughter. Something older than language. Something primal. Two people ripped apart, finding each other again. Nora buried her face in her mother's neck, small hands fisting in the hospital gown. You came back. I knew you'd come back. The warden said you forgot about me, but I knew he was lying. Never, Evelyn whispered, voice breaking. I never forgot. Not for 1 second. I tried so hard to get back to you, baby. The angels had seen terrible things, had done terrible things, but watching this reunion, several had to look away. Dutch suddenly needed to check his bike. Jax found the ceiling fascinating. Even Cole blinked rapidly. Garrett stood by the door, massive frame, still scarred hands loose at his sides. He thought about his sister Sarah, about how he'd been too late to save her, about 23 years of carrying that weight, that failure. But not today. Today, evil had lost. Today, a little girl got her mother back. Today, justice wasn't just a word. It was real. Holding each other and crying on a concrete floor, they held each other for what felt like hours but was only minutes. Finally, Evelyn pulled back slightly, cupping Nora's bruised face in her hands, looking at every cut, every mark, memorizing her daughter's face like she'd been starving for it. "I'm so sorry," Evelyn whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." "It's okay, Mommy," Nora said with the kind of wisdom that shouldn't exist in a 6-year-old. "You're here now, and Mr. Garrett and his friends are going to make sure the warden never hurts us again." Evelyn looked up at Garrett, standing in the doorway, this giant, terrifying man who'd saved her daughter's life and given her back her own. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate, but all she had. Garrett nodded once, then Cole stepped forward. "We have him," Cole said quietly. "Carver, he's in the van outside. We need to know what you want us to do." Evelyn's arms tightened around Nora protectively. She looked at her daughter, at the bruises, at the split lip, at the defensive marks on her thin arms. Then she looked back at Cole. "I want to see him," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite everything. "I want him to see that he failed, that we're both alive, that all his planning, all his cruelty, all of it was for nothing." Cole exchanged a glance with Garrett. "You sure you don't have to face him again?" "Yes, I do," Evelyn said, standing up on shaky legs. Doc Merrick moved to help her, but she waved him off. "I need him to see what he couldn't destroy, and then I need him to go to prison for the rest of his life." Nora looked up at her mother. "I want to see him too. I want to tell him he's bad and everyone's going to know it." Garrett knelt down. "You don't have to, little bird. We can handle this." "No," Nora said, her small voice carrying surprising steel. "I need to tell the truth. I need to say what he did." Evelyn looked at her daughter, saw the determination there, and nodded. "Then we'll do it together." Cole and Dutch brought Carver in. His expensive coat was dirty, stained with road salt. His perfectly styled hair disheveled. The confidence and arrogance had evaporated, replaced by fear barely contained behind indignation. "This is kidnapping," Carver said, voice trying for authority but landing near panic. "This is illegal detention. When my lawyers hear about this, you'll all spend the rest of your lives in prison." "Shut up," Cole said without emotion, shoving Carver toward the garage entrance. They brought him inside. The moment Carver's eyes adjusted to the fluorescent lighting, the moment he saw who was waiting, all color drained from his face. Evelyn stood in the center of the garage, Nora's small hand gripped tightly in hers. Mother and daughter, both alive, both free, both staring at him with identical green eyes filled with absolute contempt. "No," Carver whispered. "No, this isn't possible. You're supposed to be—" "Dead," Evelyn finished. "Yes, I imagine that would have been more convenient. Both of us frozen in a snowbank. Both of us buried by spring. Both of us gone so you could take everything." Carver's mouth opened and closed. His mind, so sharp when it came to manipulation, was failing him. The perfect plan was unraveling. "I don't know what lies these criminals have told you," Carver finally managed, "but I can explain everything. The Pine Haven Institute was for your own protection, Evelyn. You were sick. The doctor said you were a danger to yourself and to Nora. I was trying to help." "Is that what you call it?" Evelyn's voice was ice. "Help drugging me into a coma for 2 years, forging my signature, stealing from my family's trust, beating my daughter and leaving her to die." "I never touched her," Carver said quickly. Too quickly. Nora stepped forward, still holding her mother's hand, but standing straighter. She pulled up the sleeve of the oversized shirt Doc had given her, revealing the bruises. The unmistakable shape of adult fingerprints stamped into her skin. "You did this," Nora said, her young voice carrying weight that made hardened bikers shift uncomfortably. "You said I was bad. You said I didn't deserve Christmas because I wasn't your real daughter. You put me in the car and drove me to the snow, and you told me to get out. And when I didn't move fast enough, you grabbed my arm and dragged me. And then you drove away." The garage went absolutely silent. Every eye on Carver, watching his face, watching the lies die on his lips as he stared at the 6-year-old who just destroyed his defense with simple truth. Garrett stepped forward. "Cole, give me a hand." They grabbed Carver by both arms and dragged him toward the door. He started to struggle, started to shout, but Jax moved in from behind, and the sheer presence of the massive biker made Carver go limp with terror. "Where are you taking me?" Carver's voice cracked. "We're going outside," Garrett said. "You and me. We're going to have a conversation about what you did, and you're going to tell me the truth." They hauled him out into the morning sunlight. The snow lay pristine and undisturbed, glittering in the early light like diamonds. Beautiful, peaceful, exactly like the snowbank where Carver had left Nora to die. Garrett dragged Carver 20 feet from the garage and threw him into a deep drift. Carver hit hard, sinking in up to his chest, the cold immediately soaking through his expensive clothes. He gasped, the shock stealing his breath. "Cold, ain't it?" Garrett said, standing over him. He reached down, grabbed Carver by the collar, held him there. Let him feel the bite of ice against skin. Let him feel his body heat being leached away by merciless cold. "Imagine being 6 years old," Garrett continued, voice low and dangerous. "Imagine being beaten half to death. Imagine bleeding and scared and wondering why your daddy doesn't love you. Imagine the cold creeping into your bones. Imagine knowing you're going to die and not understanding why." Carver was shaking now, violent tremors racking his body. Whether from cold or fear or both was impossible to tell. "Please," he whispered. "Please, I'll give you money. Whatever you want. I have millions, tens of millions. You can have all of it. Just let me go." Garrett pulled his Colt M1911 from his waistband. The weapon was old, carried through decades of violence, the grip worn smooth by his hand. He pressed the cold steel barrel directly against Carver's forehead, right between his eyes. "Your money doesn't mean shit to me," Garrett said. "You tried to murder a little girl for a trust fund. You locked her mother away in a chemical prison for 2 years. You destroyed a family for greed, and now you're going to answer for it." Carver was crying now, tears streaming, mixing with snow. "I'm sorry, God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then how was it supposed to happen?" Garrett demanded. "Talk. Tell me everything. And if I think you're lying, if I think you're holding back even one word, I pull this trigger and we let the snow bury you like you tried to bury her." Carver broke. Whatever strength, whatever calculation had allowed him to do what he'd done, it shattered. "It started 5 years ago." Carver gasped, words tumbling out between sobs and shivers. "I was bankrupt. The business was failing. I had debts, serious debts, the kind that get you killed if you don't pay. I needed money fast." "So you targeted Evelyn." "I researched her," Carver admitted. "The Morrison family, old timber money. The trust was worth $200 million. Evelyn was the sole heir. She was young, naive, easy to manipulate. I courted her, made her fall in love with me, married her. It was all calculated from the first date to the wedding night." He coughed, shaking harder lips, starting to turn blue. "But the trust was locked. I could manage it, but I couldn't touch the principal. Not without her approval. And she started asking questions, started noticing discrepancies, started talking to lawyers. So you had her declared incompetent." "I paid a psychiatrist," Carver said. "Paid him to diagnose her with schizophrenia. Paid a judge to sign the commitment papers. It was supposed to be temporary. Just long enough to get her to sign the dissolution documents. But she refused. Even drugged, even locked away, she refused. His eyes wild with fear, and Cole looked up at Garrett. The trust had a clause. If Evelyn died while institutionalized, the money would go to her direct heir, to Nora. But a 6-year-old can't manage $200 million. The court would appoint a guardian. Me, I'd have full control until she turned 18. And then Nora would have had an accident. Garrett said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. It wasn't supposed to be murder, Carver said desperately. It was supposed to look like an accident, a tragic accident on a snowy night, a confused child wandering away. Nobody would question it. Nobody would investigate. Except she survived, Garrett said, because I found her. Carver's confession spilled out now, unstoppable. I planned it all. From the wedding night, every step, every document, every payment to every corrupt official. It took 5 years. 5 years of pretending to love them. 5 years of sleeping next to Evelyn and playing father to Nora. All of it was a lie. All of it was for the money. The magnitude of the evil was breathtaking. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a mistake that spiraled out of control. This was cold, calculated, premeditated destruction of an entire family over 5 years. This was a man who'd spent half a decade playing husband and father while planning murder. Garrett felt his finger tighten on the trigger. It would be so easy. One pull, one bullet, justice served hot and immediate. But then he thought about Nora, about her small voice saying she wanted him to go to jail like in the movies, wanted everyone to know he was bad, wanted justice, not revenge. Garrett lowered the gun, pulled Carver out of the snow, and threw him onto the cold ground. You don't deserve a bullet, he said. You deserve to rot in a cage for the rest of your miserable life. Cole appeared from the garage entrance. With him was a man Garrett didn't recognize. Tall, lean, wearing a dark suit under a winter coat, carrying himself with federal authority. Special Agent Harrison Byrne, the man said, pulling out FBI credentials. I'm going to need you to step away from Mr. Carver. Garrett looked at Cole, who nodded slightly. This had been arranged. The FBI had been monitoring Carver for over a year, investigating financial irregularities. Cole had contacted them hours ago. He confessed, Garrett said, stepping back. Everything, the marriage, the commitment, the embezzlement, the attempted murder. All of it. Agent Byrne pulled out a small digital recorder. I know, I was listening. We've been recording everything since you dragged him outside. He knelt next to Carver, still lying in the snow, hypothermic and broken. Thaddeus Carver, you're under arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda warning continued, but Carver wasn't listening. He was staring at the recorder, watching his entire life collapse into that small device. Everything he'd said, everything he'd admitted, all recorded, all admissible. I want my lawyer, Carver finally whispered. You're going to need a very good one, Byrne said, because I'm going to make it my personal mission to ensure you never see the outside of a federal prison again. 2 more FBI agents emerged from a black SUV. They hauled Carver to his feet, cuffed him, led him away. He didn't struggle, didn't protest, just walked like a man already dead, his expensive shoes leaving tracks that would be covered by the next storm. Byrne stayed behind, watching the SUV drive away, then turned to Garrett and Cole. I should arrest you too. Kidnapping, assault, illegal detention, breaking and entering at Pine Haven. I could probably add a dozen other charges. But you're not going to, Cole said. Not a question. No, Byrne agreed, because you just handed me the biggest case of my career. Because you rescued 2 victims from a situation the system failed to protect them from. And because, frankly, Carver deserved everything he got and worse. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Garrett. If you ever decide to go legitimate, call me. The FBI could use someone with your particular skill set. Garrett looked at the card, then at Byrne, then back at the card. He almost laughed. I don't think I'd pass the background check. Probably not, Byrne admitted, but the offer stands. He walked back to his vehicle, paused, turned back. For what it's worth, you did good work here. You saved that little girl's life. You rescued her mother. You brought a monster to justice. That counts for something. Then he was gone, the SUV disappearing down the snow-covered road, taking Thaddeus Carver toward federal custody and the justice he had spent 5 years thinking he could avoid. Inside the garage, Evelyn and Nora had watched the entire confrontation through the small window in the steel door. When Garrett came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, Evelyn walked up to him. She was steadier now, the IV fluids and the absence of sedatives beginning to restore her strength. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for not killing him. Thank you for giving us justice instead of revenge." "Thank your daughter," Garrett said, looking down at Nora. "She's the one who knew what the right thing was." Nora stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Garrett's leg in an impromptu hug. He froze, unsure what to do with his hands, these massive, scarred hands that had done terrible things now hovering awkwardly over a child's small shoulders. "You're a good man, Mr. Garrett," Nora said, voice muffled against his jeans. "Even if you are scary looking." That broke the tension. Several of the angels laughed genuine laughter that filled the garage with warmth. Garrett carefully patted Nora's head, his touch gentle despite his size. "Scary looking is kind of my thing, little bird," he said. Doc Merrick stepped forward with medical authority. "Both of you need proper hospital care. Evelyn needs a full detox from the medications and a complete physical. Nora needs follow-up treatment for the hypothermia and someone to document the abuse injuries for the federal case. The FBI is arranging transport to a secure private hospital in Seattle," Agent Byrne had mentioned before leaving. "Full protection, no press, no exposure. You'll be safe there." Evelyn nodded. "When do we leave?" "There's a medical helicopter arriving in 30 minutes, Doc said. Federal protection all the way." Those 30 minutes passed in a strange calm. The adrenaline was fading. The immediate danger was over. The angels began to disperse, mounting their bikes and heading home to their own families, their own lives. They'd done what they came to do, saved a child, brought down a monster, lived up to the code. Dutch stopped by Garrett before leaving. "Hell of a Christmas, Iron." "Yeah," Garrett agreed, "hell of a Christmas." One by one they left, until it was just Garrett and Cole and Doc waiting with Evelyn and Nora for the helicopter. "You did good," Cole said quietly. "Sarah would be proud." It was the first time Cole had mentioned Garrett's sister in years. The first time anyone had acknowledged the ghost that had been driving Garrett since he'd found Nora in the snow. The little girl who died because nobody had been there to save her. The wound that had never healed. "Maybe," Garrett said. "Maybe she would." The helicopter arrived with a thunder of rotors landing in the salvage yard in a storm of displaced snow. Medical personnel jumped out efficient and professional, loading Evelyn and Nora onto stretchers despite their protests that they could walk. As they were being loaded into the helicopter, Nora called out, "Wait, Mr. Garrett, wait." The medical team paused. Nora fumbled in the pocket of the oversized shirt she was wearing and pulled out something small. She gestured for Garrett to come closer. He walked to the helicopter, ducked under the rotors, and knelt down beside the stretcher. "I found this on the floor," Nora said, pressing something into his palm. "I think it's magic. I think it saved me, and I want you to have it so it can save you too." Garrett opened his hand. Lying in his palm was a small, bent silver star. A cheap ornament, the kind sold at dollar stores, tarnished and dented. The kind of thing that would be worthless to anyone else. To Garrett, it was priceless. "Thank you, little bird," he said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't bother hiding. "I'll keep it safe." "Merry Christmas, Mr. Garrett," Nora said. "Merry Christmas, Nora." The helicopter lifted off, rising into the morning sky, carrying mother and daughter towards safety and healing in a future that had almost been stolen from them. Garrett stood in the snow watching until the helicopter was just a speck against the blue, his hand closed tight around the silver star. Cole walked up beside him. You good? Yeah, Garrett said. I'm good. 6 months later, on a sunny afternoon in June, Garrett received a package in the mail. Inside was a photograph. Evelyn and Nora on a beach somewhere warm, both smiling, both healthy, both free. On the back, in careful handwriting, Evelyn had written, "Thank you for giving us our lives back." Also in the package was a letter from Nora written in the careful print of a 7-year-old who was concentrating very hard on making sure every letter was perfect. Dear Mr. Garrett, Mommy says I should write to say thank you. We are happy now. I go to school and I have friends. Mommy says we are safe because of you and your friends. I think about you sometimes. I hope you are happy too. I hope the star is keeping you safe like you kept me safe. Your friend Nora P. Mommy says angels are real. I think she means you. Garrett sat on the porch of his small apartment, the letter in one hand, a beer in the other, watching the sun set over Spokane. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver star. It lived there now next to his heart, a reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, the world worked the way it was supposed to. The federal case against Thaddeus Carver had been swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming. The recorded confession, the computer files showing years of embezzlement, the testimony from Evelyn Morrison, clear-eyed and devastating on the witness stand, the medical evidence from Nora's injuries, the security footage from Carver's own garage. His lawyers had tried, filed motion after motion, tried to suppress evidence, tried to claim illegal detention invalidated the confession, tried to paint Carver as a victim of a biker gang vendetta. None of it worked. The jury had deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years on the federal bench, had shown no mercy. Mr. Carver, you are a predator of the worst kind. You spent 5 years systematically destroying a family for financial gain. You imprisoned an innocent woman. You attempted to murder a child. You corrupted the institutions meant to protect the vulnerable. This court sentences you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Carver had shown no emotion as he was led away in chains. The man who'd once thought himself untouchable was now property of the federal prison system, destined to spend the rest of his life in a cage. The Morrison Trust had been restored to Evelyn's control. She'd taken the money and created a foundation dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence and abuse, providing legal services, funding safe houses, supporting prosecutions of abusers who thought wealth and power made them immune. Evelyn and Nora had moved to a modest house in Seattle, not the mansion they could have afforded, just a regular house in a regular neighborhood where Nora could go to school and make friends and be a normal kid. They'd hired private security, but the kind that stayed invisible. Garrett's phone rang, pulling him from his memories. Cole. You see the news? Cole asked without preamble. Which news? Carver got shanked in the yard at Leavenworth yesterday, punctured lung. He'll live, but he's in the infirmary for the next month. Good, Garrett said. Word is it was arranged by some of the other inmates. Turns out child abusers aren't popular even in federal prison. Karma's a bitch, Garrett observed. That she is, Cole agreed. Listen, we got a call from a guy in Tacoma. Says his ex-wife violated the custody agreement, took his kids across state lines, won't bring them back. Courts aren't helping. He's desperate. Garrett felt something stir in his chest, that same instinct that had made him stop on Highway 10 on a snowy Christmas Eve. That same code that demanded protection of the innocent. You thinking what I'm thinking? Garrett asked. I'm thinking we might have found our new purpose, Cole said. I'm thinking there's a lot of people out there who fall through the cracks, who the system fails, who needs someone willing to operate outside the lines to make things right. Could be dangerous, Garrett said. Could bring a lot of heat. When has that ever stopped us? Garrett looked at the silver star in his palm, thought about Nora's letter, thought about the way it felt to save someone instead of destroy them, to build instead of tear down, to be the kind of man his sister Sarah would have been proud of. Set up a meeting, Garrett said. Let's hear what he has to say. He ended the call and sat for a while longer watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Society saw the leather, saw the patches, saw the death's head, and they thought they knew who the dangerous men were. They thought they knew who the monsters were. But they were wrong. The real monsters wore suits and smiled for cameras and hid behind money and respectability. And the real heroes, sometimes they rode on two wheels. Sometimes they lived by a code the world didn't understand. Sometimes they wore leather and chains and looked like the kind of men you'd cross the street to avoid. Garrett stood up, pocketed the silver star, and walked inside. He had plans to make, people to help, a new purpose that felt like redemption. The Hells Angels will ride again, not for profit, not for territory, but for the lost ones, the forgotten ones, the ones the system failed. Real heroes don't wear badges. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they ride on two wheels. And sometimes, when the world needs them most, they show up in the snow on Christmas Eve and change everything. Garrett fired up his panhead. The engine roared to life, that familiar thunder that had been the soundtrack to his adult life. He rode out into the summer evening, the silver star in his pocket, catching the last rays of sunlight, a reminder of a little girl in pink pajamas who taught an outlaw biker what real justice looked like. The road stretched ahead, full of possibility, full of people who needed help, full of monsters who needed to be stopped. And Garrett Dalton, Iron Hell's Angel, guardian of the innocent, was ready to ride toward whatever came next. The story that began in the snow on the holiest night of the year had ended with justice served and lives saved. But it was also a beginning, a new chapter, a new purpose. Sometimes the darkest night leads to the brightest dawn. Sometimes the most unlikely people become heroes. And sometimes when all hope seems lost, angels appear from the most unexpected places. Even if those angels ride Harleys and wear leather and have more scars than anyone should carry, especially then.